any thoughts on last night's game? I kind of want to get to today, the moves, what we've seen so far. But last night in particular, I mean, we've sort of talked about Parker Ford, who I don't think anyone was really considering as being legitimately in a competition for one of the jobs. He's standing now with David Gustafsson still in the A group. He was big, and obviously lots of talk about the young defensemen that were in the lineup in Declan Chisholm, Ville, Heinola, as well as a player like Logan Stanley, who's very much in a dogfight for a roster spot.
Yeah, Parker Ford is the best, most positive story to come out of last night. So let's start there. When Manitoba signed him last year and he put up 4 points in 8 games, there was just sort of an, oh, neat. Manitoba found a good minor league hockey player or a professional league hockey player in the minors. And great, good for them. But for him to show up in camp now, well outside that list of potential 13 forwards, if you start that list with David Gustafsson, you have Dominic Toninato, Jansen Harkins, Jeffrey Ville to an extent, Christian Reichel to an extent. You didn't really hear a lot of Parker Ford talk in that conversation. I think after, I went back after last night and I went through the notepad. What have I noticed about him at camp in the drills? And it turns out he actually kind of gave Logan Stanley a heck of a run for his money in terms of a net front battle that I was pretty amused by at one point. And that's a huge size discrepancy. So, it's just nice to see the hustle guys kind of get reward that power play time that he got, the goal that he scored, gets a chance to take a shootout. Now this morning rewarded by being in that A group with the vets. And, I'm betting he plays in Ottawa. I'm betting that Rick Bowness is sort of laying a gauntlet down for him saying, okay, well, you did it against Calgary's B team or C team, whatever you want to call that. Let's see how you can handle it against something that'll look a little closer to an NHL team with Ottawa at home.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he really was, he was everywhere, almost scored on the next shift afterwards. And there's a lot of people talking about him that I don't think were even familiar with him before going to the game last night. But maybe the most interesting battles right now is, at the bottom of the depth chart when it comes to the blue line. Ville played a ton last night. I thought Declan Chisholm had some moments. Logan Stanley, certainly, I think, earned some props from Rick Bowness for the way he stood up after that ridiculous cheap shot on Cole Perfetti. But big picture, what did you make of those players last night and where they stand right now as we kind of get into the next phase of training camp?
Let me tell you what, there is a clear top 6 in terms of quality in the Winnipeg Jets blue line in my mind. And every single one of those names is one of the obvious guys. Start with Josh Morrissey at number 1 and slot in. I'm not sure who you want to put at number 6, but Nate Schmidt and Dylan Sandberg were on that third pair for most of last season. I have seen nothing that says that top 6 has changed heading into this year. And if you're Logan Stanley, that's a disappointment because you arrive at camp, your 2 ankle injuries from last year have healed. You put in the work in the off season. I haven't seen him take a step above anybody in terms of stealing a roster spot. Maybe that changes with Nate Schmidt having a lower body situation right now, depending on how that lasts. But I don't think that that's mission accomplished for him. Al Capobianco, he certainly wouldn't have stepped into the top 6, but I think he's delivered a lot of consistency, and that's what Rick Bowness likes at the edge of his lineup in terms of if you're looking for a number 7 or number 8. It's not really about what your best day looks like. It's how often you give. It's how often you're able to give your plug and play best day. And I think with Capobianco, he's most consistent, but now he's got a lower body situation going on as well. So we go to Ville Heinola and Declan Chisholm. Both of those players have played well at camp. No complaints, no issues. Heinola had a so-so start. I'd say the first half hour of day 1 on the ice was a little bit sketchy from him, some missed passes, some errant moments. And I noticed from the stands, Nino Niederreiter sort of just between drill setups swung by Heinola, gave him a little stick tap and a quick word. Heinola seemed to come around after that, just maybe relaxed a little bit. I think his best game is the best of the 4 guys outside of the top 6, but there's been some inconsistency there as well. I'm encouraged with Heinola's defending in terms of how he handles some of the bigger, stronger NHL guys. But it's still at that spot where he's always like a step off balance, or he's gotten turned almost the wrong way, but he still gets a stick on puck as a shot attempt goes off and he's blocking shots. And when I say he's off balance, well, he still comes out of that corner with the puck more often than not. So I don't feel safe and secure with him defending against those bigger, stronger Flames the other night, or even in his first game. But the results have been there, so that's progress, if nothing else. And with Declan Chisholm, I think he's been more consistent than Heinola has, but I think he's still learning to defend at this NHL level as well. And we may see those guys, I almost want to say, get weeded out as the NHL competition ramps up, as the exhibition rosters get more like what the regular season rosters are going to look like.
I was just talking about this topic with Brandon, and we both agreed that Chisholm's, I think, done enough to certainly not have the organization feel comfortable risking him on the waiver wire. So if he's on the club and we have this very clearly delineated top six, how do you think that works for Declan this year? Because I don't think, and I gave a ton of credit to Capobianco last year for how he would play after being in the press box for long extended periods. I don't think that's a plan you really want to have for a young player that, has shown the growth that he has so far.
Yeah, if you're Winnipeg and you don't have him inside your top six, and it would be hard for me to imagine him being inside the top six, you probably want him to play. You would wish he had a waivers exemption. You would wish you'd be able to play him big minutes with the Moose. And obviously, with that not being the case, you don't want to risk a guy like that to waivers. And now you're left in that awkward spot of what can this relatively younger player do as that fill-in when moments hit, when injuries hit, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, Dylan Samberg, to an extent, started there last year, but he left no doubts when he got into the lineup, and his defending was excellent from the moment that he started playing, didn't give his job up. So it's possible. It's possible that he would be able to claim a spot. But he's starting from a little bit further back, I would say. One thing, though, coming out of this morning, and just to keep in the back of our minds, Kyle Capobianco, just a lower body situation, Nate Schmidt as well. Theoretically possible that, depending on the timelines on these guys, and I know that the first day of the regular season is almost 2 weeks away or so now, but Winnipeg might be able to get around all of this by putting somebody on the IR and keeping a guy like Declan Chisholm up without ever having to risk him on waivers, and making some of their roster decisions a lot easier for themselves.
Yeah, at a certain point, I guess the bottom line, though, is if you've got a young man that's up with your club and you're not comfortable putting him on waivers, at some point you have to get into the lineup. And listen, that's not Rick Bowness's concern. I mean, he is not sitting here. He's not the director of player development. He's the head coach and trying to win hockey games. You know what I mean? And I just do wonder whether, the club, if Declan is there, will have maybe a little bit of a different, strategy as it comes to shaking up the lineup every now and then. And now, giving some veterans, a player like Nate Schmidt, a game or two off at times, and get Chisholm in to, get some experience at the NHL level and show what he can do if he's going to be part of this roster for the season.
Yeah, I guess there's two perspectives on that I have. The first one is, I don't think Rick Bowness cares what a prospect does 6 years from now. You know what I mean? Just like you just said it. This isn't a developmental year. It's not a coach who showed up to be that developmental long-term coach. Obviously, he's a good person. He's a good communicator. He's going to work with the youth and all of that sort of things. But if you think that a 68-year-old Rick Bowness, with I think it's a club option at the end of this year, they'll communicate on what happens to him into the future, is thinking several years down the road, I think that would be a mistake. So that's why I think that around the edges of the roster, you're going to see him defer to veterans and consistency. It's one of the reasons why before Parker Ford showed up and has looked as good as he has, I think Dominic Toninato has impressed me almost the most in terms of that next wave of players. And at 29 years old, he might be able to offer a bit more consistency in and out of the lineup than, say, even a David Gustafsson, who's a player whose ceiling I rate much higher and whose hockey sense has really shown there might be something more there if he were ever able to stay healthy and get a regular rotation. Same thing on defense, where I'm not sure that Rick Bowness is necessarily going to be prioritizing minutes for younger players just because he can. The way that could change, and Bowness talked to me a little bit about this in a scrum, mind you, but it was a question I asked last year, where he seems to enjoy rotating guys in from time to time because he spends a lot of his October and November and December thinking about what hockey is going to look like in April and May. by which I mean if a player has gotten into games halfway frequently, even if he's not a regular, it's going to go a long way for the team's playoff chances if they last long enough. Because guys, a defense will run 7, 8, 9, 10 players deep by the end of your average playoff run. And I think that's the sort of thing where if Chisholm can at least prove he's on that veteran level, then he could get rotated in. And from that perspective, you might see him get minutes.
Murat of The Athletic with us. Murat, let's move from the periphery of the lineup and the guys battling to be on the team to the middle of the lineup. And I wanted to ask you about Alex Iafallo in particular. Got a chance to see him in person, in game action for the first time last night. And I mean, I think there's a lot to be excited about with what he brings, especially playing with Adam Lowry. Now, we'd talked a couple weeks ago projecting lines where things were going to go, and you had originally mentioned that you had thought that maybe he and Niederreiter would be swapped, and, Iafallo was playing up. And I just wanted to ask you about it, and you had said that after watching it, you actually think that maybe they got it right this time. What did you make of that choice for the club and just the Iafallo effect to a third line or a second line wherever he ends up playing regularly?
Yeah, Winnipeg is in a good position with sort of those middle six wingers in that they can do a lot of things. And Iafallo was impressive last night, I thought. Just as the crowd was hearing the announcement that his assist had been added to Parker Ford's power play goal. Well, right as his name was mentioned, he spun one of Calgary's younger players into the ice and then cut in for a chance. There was a PK situation where Ville Heinola's stick blew up as he tried to clear the puck. It was Iafallo who rotated down and made sure that Heinola had a stick, and conveniently it was a left-handed one, and all was well. So there are a lot of things like that he does well that help. Heading into the year, I thought, okay, give him to Cole Perfetti on that second line. Iafallo has two-way, expertise, one might say. He'll clean up any defensive situations and give Nino Niederreiter to Adam Lowry. Because if you looked at the numbers last season, Adam Lowry's game took off the moment Niederreiter showed up on that third line. They outscored opposition by a lot. They kept the puck in the offensive zone. It was almost as if as soon as Niederreiter arrived, Lowry had the quality on his line to drive play the way that I think that we all look forward to him doing. To watch it play out on the ice, though, so far at camp, I like Niederreiter with Perfetti. I like Niederreiter having a little bit more of a bulldog mentality than Iafallo. There's a physicality to Niederreiter that goes into the corners and goes to the front of the net. And I think he's going to be able to just make a little bit more space for Perfetti than Iafallo necessarily would have. At the same time, Iafallo's two-way acumen and just the fact that he's in the right spots, I want to say in open ice. His forechecking lanes that he takes are great. His stick is active. He curls back, and he's a really good 200-foot player in terms of hustling back into his own zone and then knowing what to do when he gets there as well. And I think that if you're sizing up Adam Lowry's line to do some real heavy lifting, tough matchups against elite players, maybe he's got a little bit more of that open ice defending in him than Niederreiter would necessarily have. They're both quality players. I think they would both have success in either spot, but maybe stylistically the chemistry is actually best this way. Iafallo and Lowry, and then Niederreiter with Perfetti.
While we're talking about Iafallo, what have been your early observations of the other two former Kings in Gabriel Vilardi, who was playing with Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, as well as Rasmus Kupari, who we've seen in both home preseason games this week?
Yeah, Rasmus Kupari, I'm just glad that he looks like he deserves that fourth line center spot at the bare minimum. There was no way heading into camp Winnipeg would waive a player that was a part of the package for Pierre-Luc Dubois, not just because of optics, but obviously they wanted him for a reason, and they believe that he can grow. Rick Bowness said the other day, fourth line, and hey, maybe we'll elevate him if he shows a little bit of pop. And his speed, his forechecking, it's been there. I don't think he's an absolute impact player or a play driver at this level, but he deserves that spot. And I think that is a baseline for his Jets career with room to grow. That's good news. Vilardi, though, let's talk about Gabriel Vilardi. And, after he was acquired, I go down the YouTube rabbit hole. You watch all the goals, you watch all the clips, and you start imagining, okay, what is this player going to look like? How is he going to fit? And the thing that he does best in LA, if you watch those clips last year, is exactly what Rick Bowness was praising him for today. He can protect the puck on the wall. He can use his body to keep the puck safe. He can make plays with it as well. Nothing really dies on his stick because his head is up and his reads about where his line mates are exceptional. You saw it on that spinning pass to Kyle Connor. That was a highlight reel play, but it manifests itself in so many smaller, subtle ways throughout a game as well. And I think that puck possession, head up, look for somebody to dart into space, buy time for your line mates sort of play. I think that's tailor-made to be a winger on Mark Scheifele's right side. And with Kyle Connor being such a dangerous shooting threat and really good at timing his cuts into soft ice as well, there's a lot to like about that group offensively, and they should be able to outscore whatever top defensemen get thrown at them.